is Jane Low, and I'm at OWETS here in Singapore. And with me today, I'm very pleased and very privileged to have Emil Tan, who is a very passionate and committed cybersecurity leader here in the Singapore cybersecurity ecosystem. And he just delivered a keynote as well earlier. And he will be sharing with us highlights of his keynote as well as his experience in his career of this ever-evolving field of cybersecurity. So thank you so much for your time today.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Right. So you wear a lot of different hats, right? You are a cybersecurity, I believe, community leader for Red Alpha, which is a talent development company. You are also the chair of the Crest Asia Council, and you also founded Division Zero, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, Singapore cybersecurity community here. And you also founded at the same time SynCon, which is a very international cybersecurity conference. So you wear a lot of different hats, and I think our audience will be keen to know, how do you get into this field of cybersecurity? Tell us about your personal journey.
Well, how I got started actually is, a lot of it is, I'll say accident, right? So I know a lot of people, like, their origin story is like, oh, they got hacked, they make it their personal mission, they want to get into cybersecurity, or they hack games when they were young, and so on and so forth. Boringly enough, or maybe interestingly enough, mine didn't really start out that way. It's actually a very common story, I would say, in actually quite a lot of most Singaporeans, which is when we come to the age of 16, where we need to start deciding what are we going to do after O-levels, right? Should I go to polytechnic? Should I go to junior colleges? And so on and so forth. What do you want to do in your life? And back then, actually, I have no idea what I want to do at all. The only thing I knew that I was good at in school was maths, and that's it. I'm not a natural language person, I'm not great at humanities, I'm not really great at science, and so on and so forth. The only thing I like is just maths, right? And what I did is I just went to all the various different open houses and look at all the course catalog that Singapore institution has to offer. And the one thing that I found that requires maths is engineering and IT. So I was just choosing between these two. IT kind of sounds a little bit more futuristic than engineering. So I looked more into it, and then I saw security. And I thought, hey, that sounds interesting. I have seen movies about it. I have watched a couple of series on digital forensics and so on and so forth. And I thought, hey, why not? So I went into it with not knowing at all how actually computer works back even before I started the course. I have no idea what a RAM is, what a ROM is, and so on. So everything was totally fresh. Went in there, have been loving and been in that field since.
Right, so you kind of like stumbled into this field of cybersecurity by accident, sounds like.
Yes.
But you stay in that field for what, close to 2 decades, or not giving away your future,
Yeah, almost, yes.
So you've seen quite a lot of high-profile incidents over the span of 2 decades, I suppose. If not the first disruption on critical infrastructure, one of the biggest ransomware, WannaCry, right? The recent supply chain SolarWinds incident as well. What are some of the lessons that you take away from these incidents?
I'll say that, over the last, close to 2 decades that I have been involved or somewhat involved in cybersecurity is, I think the first lesson definitely is things change, right? I think when I just started in the first couple of years, there is no such thing as cloud. First lesson learned is you will never be prepared enough for the next wave of technology. And once it comes out, it's going to go fast and furious whenever there's a business case. Cloud was a massive lesson learned. One day, I spent 3 years just looking at very standard servers, clients, and so on and so forth. The next thing, everyone's talking about cloud, right? Eventually, later, when there was the next wave, I think it's IoT, right? And slowly, lots of incidences, lots of security challenges regarding IoT. And one big lesson learned definitely is technology will move. Beyond technology, let's talk a little bit more to your question on incidents, right? So, over time, the biggest things that we kind of have to accept is sometimes incidents that affects you might not kind of directly targeted at you, right? So some of the examples and use cases you mentioned, like SolarWind, they are not really targeted at you, but eventually it will hurt you. In security, it's not just about, oh, what do you have and what do you need to protect itself. I mean, there's a lot of other considerations of indirect impacts and so on and so forth.
So the only constant is change, and we could be, collateral damage in this this wave of cyber incidents. The other question that I want to sort of get into is, the different hats that you have, right, with the different organizations. Red Alpha, Crest, Division Zero, Syncon, right? Can you describe for us highlights of a bit of their mission and why is building the cybersecurity ecosystem so important?
So among all the hats that I wear, I would say let's start with Div Zero. I think that's the kind of the first gig that I was involved in or have created. So I started Div Zero back in 13 years ago, about there. So we started about 2011. Back then, I was actually running cybersecurity operations in a government organization. The industry is slightly different as compared to now, right? So now a lot of things is actually available on the web, right? There's a lot of training platforms you can sign up for. There's like online labs like Hack the Box, immersive labs, so on and so forth, that you can just log on and get your hands on stuff, learn, train your skills. Lots of conferences are kind of recorded, right? You can kind of listen to a couple of the talks. But back in 2011, that's not really the case, right? Or even before, a couple of years before that as well. YouTube wasn't really that big a thing yet. A lot of content and so on and so forth is not really accessible, right? So as a cyber ops guy, we always kind of want to be plugged in and want to know what is the new exploits, what are the incidences, what are the insights, what are other practitioners doing, what are they seeing. There's not a lot of that exchange. But as much as possible, I try to, together with some of my colleagues back then, is when they go overseas, we're like, all right, you need to bring all the stuff back, you need to bring data back, you need to bring some of the insights back that we can do our jobs better. And part of that also, we were together like listening to podcasts and so on and so forth. And we are seeing great community and exchanges in countries like the US and Europe. And I was just wondering, like, why don't we have that in, we don't really have that in Singapore at all, right? A lot of it are kind of like businesses exchanging name cards, buying and selling solutions, but not a lot. There's not a strong practitioner community or not a strong practitioner network that amongst analysts, amongst practitioners, amongst pen testers, and so on and so forth, that we will actually gain a lot of value just by talking to each other, right? Just by sharing with each other. And that's how Div Zero kind of got started, right? And it started actually in a McDonald's, right, okay. Just about 5 to 6 of us at a heartland called Bukit Batok. So it's just a few of us. We were just starting out, and we decided, hey, let's meet every other evening and share about what we are doing, Wow. And then we learn about there's a new technique which is called memory forensics, that forensic investigators should start getting into, and so on and so forth. So we kind of start to do this like crowd learning. That's how kind of Div Zero started, and over the next 10 years, we just kind of snowballed. Our monthly meetup now, close to 100 people. We have our conference now as Syncon. Yeah, and we start to have more youth initiatives like GCC. You were involved in that as well. Yeah, so I was bringing this community, and Crest, a couple of years ago, Crest kind of knocked on my door and go like, hey, they're trying to build this community as well here in Asia to advocate for better professionalization, standardizations, and so on and so forth. And I thought, hey, it's a good segue, it's a good extension to what I'm doing. It's against natural. So I kind of took that on, and that's kind of snowballed to be something bigger as well. And naturally as well as Red Alpha. So my friend had this great idea, and we kind of brainstormed a little bit more and how we can kind of operationalize, and that's how eventually I got involved in Red Alpha as well.
I want to just briefly touch on these various organizations that you just described, right? There's, I guess, a huge focus on the technical side of things. But earlier at the keynote, you also emphasized, creativity and curiosity are also very essential elements to be a good cybersecurity defender, right? And you talked about the hacker mindset. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it's the motivation actually behind this keynote is, in some way, it kind of origin a little bit from a rant. Like as mentioned, right? I've been in this industry for close to 2 decades, right? I've seen the transition between the 2000s to the early 2010s, late 2010s, and today, right? So the industry kind of have moved quite drastically or have evolved quite differently. Actually, a lot of us, when we started in cyber and then in the ecosystem that kind of, or the community, the international community, I kind of plugged into, was quite different back in the days as compared to now. Quite a lot of us actually got into cyber or were in cyber, actually not because of, we want a job. I joined because it was fun, right? There's a lot of things we can learn. There's, we are breaking things, we are learning things. We make things better, we secure, think about, wouldn't it be great how we can mitigate against certain attacks in a different creative manner and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of very healthy and fun discussion. And we have that, and it's always exciting to have that conversations with professionals and hackers and practitioners abroad as well. But over the years, we become more and more professional in that sense. Because back then, we are just like, we are in security. We secure our systems. There's no such thing as you coming in like, we don't really say things like, are you a blue teamer or a red teamer, right? Okay. We don't really go, I want to be a pen tester, I want to be a SOC analyst, and I want to be an AppSec guy, I want to be this and that.
It's a lot more structured now.
Yes, now it's a lot more structured. And especially nowadays, I'll say actually, especially during COVID period and up to now, the most, if I can get a penny for every time someone come up to me and ask me like, what cert should I take? What should I do to get a job, or to be a red teamer, or to be this and that? Yeah. It's just a very different discussion.
Very formal.
Yeah. It sounds like, a lot of people now want to get into cyber. It's like there's this structured path. I take this course, I get this job, I do my job, and that's it. Whereas in the past, a lot of that conversation is about, some interesting projects that we are doing. What have you learned? And then the conversation eventually said, you're doing these cool things, why don't you work for me? And I felt that curiosity, that curiosity and innovativeness, the creativity of being a hacker kind of slowly get lost. And that's something I kind of start to get worried about. Because one thing that I think the biggest message really out there for today's keynote is for cybersecurity, as things kind of evolve, right? We are actually fighting against malicious actors that they themselves, they are creative, they are innovative, they know how to exploit us, right? They know how to exploit organizations, the victims, and so on. But yet, if we are continually churning out professionals, thinking that I just need to do this tactic, step 1, 2, 3, 4, get a job, sit down in front of a computer, look at something that flashes red, and then just click a few buttons and I'm done, I think we'll be in a very, very deep trouble. And that's something that as all the different hats that I try to wear, that, I try to instill this culture, and that, we need to be better in terms of being a hacker, and to be able to think differently, to really reshape the whole digital infrastructure and the digital landscape in order for us to kind of combat the upcoming threats.
Yeah, I think it's always like a cat and mouse game, isn't it, with the adversary? So to be a step ahead, we have to have a mindset of thinking out of the box, right? And then we can't, be so structured in going through this certification or formal routes, right? And yeah, I buy into your emphasis that we need to have this hacker mindset to retain that curiosity, right? That creativity. Yes, so you talk about the only constant is change, right? And there's always constant new technologies, emerging technologies. Now I'm going to ask you a question about AI, which, we can't avoid that conversation, So what do you think AI is going to do to, the cyber defenders? Obviously, we know that how it's going to make the cyber adversaries more sophisticated and advanced.
I think the tech kind of like the standard answer usually when you talk about AI and security is always from that two camps of thoughts, right? So first is, are we talking about AI for security or security for AI, right? So first, definitely AI is going to be used widely everywhere, and now it's going to be part of that technology stack, all organizations, personally as well, that we're gonna have AI one way or another in our lives, right? So I think the big conversations that a lot of people has been having for the last couple of years is then how do we secure that usage of AI? And usually that conversations get into like AI governance, AI ethics, and so on and so forth. So, and then on the other end of it, then you have AI for security, right? Which pretty much now you go to any organizations or any solution company, right? You go to any of the business expo, you talk to any vendors, they will say, "Oh, I got this. I can do all this, and I got AI, right?" And I think if we, just put away all the company jargon or buzzwords aside, I think AI definitely going to transform quite a lot of things. I think speed, efficacy, as well as effectiveness is, everything's going to change quite a lot. As you mentioned, attackers they themselves they are going to use AI as well. It's not just going to be us, right? So eventually, it's really about kind of who use it better. I would say for now, maybe the attackers are, because it's not that hard to automate stuff using AI to launch attacks. Personally, I think because I do talk to a lot of governments from time to time because of my from the hats I wear with CREST and as a community leader. One thing I kind of I find quite interesting, which is talking to some of the foreign governments in countries like say Japan, or especially the non-English speaking countries. In the past, they have a natural defense of phishing not hitting them that hard, because foreign languages is their natural defense, right? But now with AI and getting more and more accurate, it might not really be that case anymore with the crazy translation and so on and so forth. So the attack surface is just going to get larger. And AI for security, I think there's a lot of promise there. For us, I think now really the question is how we can really use that more, how we can understand ML ops, AI ops in terms of like how do we kind of translate that into better security operations. Of course, then the next question is how much then can we trust the results from AI, right? So whether can we really depend on it? And I think it might get there, right? Is eventually the industry, and more there will be another kind of route of job opportunity, which is AI engineers or data engineers in the security field.
Yeah, I think in terms of job security, initially there was a lot of worries and concerns that AI is going to, be a threat to cybersecurity defenders, but I think you're right that it's actually going to add more jobs. So I just have one last question, if I may, right? So we talk about how it's important to build a cybersecurity community, and we talk about nurturing young cybersecurity defenders, mid-career professionals, seasoned cybersecurity professionals like yourself. But I think one demographic that we sometimes don't really talk too much about is our elderly parents, and how they could also be vulnerable to some of these cybersecurity attacks or incidents, like, for example, phishing and social engineering and all that. So what are your tips, for some security professionals like myself, right? How do we, talk to our parents about the importance of cybersecurity?
I think the formula to it is focus on the impact, right? So I think it's going to be the same advice for any security practitioners to talk about cybersecurity to non-technical people. It's going to be the same as communicating to the board, communicating to management. Focus on what they care about, right? For the board and for the organization, they care about what's the impact of the organization, right? And what does then security means in terms of that value. So I think for senior citizens, for the elderlies, talking about security is the same thing, right? Get them to understand a little bit, how their day-to-day life kind of evolve around technology, and how are they using technology, and what are the use cases in that sense, and then focus on some of the impacts on that. The other is actually also focusing on, just sharing some of the news with them, right? It's something we have to do in moderation, right? And sometimes, be together with them as part of this journey, because one thing I've seen and realized, and is actually quite scary, is actually among some of the senior citizens or the elderlies themselves, amongst the uncles and aunties, they actually have chat groups among themselves. And sometimes some of this news, which is it can actually be fake news, and they share among each other.
That's right, yeah.
So and I've seen like people packaging it as security tips to tell them to download this and that. So it become a reverse thing, and they tell them, and then they start to spread because and it's like, if you can't do this, your phone is going to get hacked, and so on and so forth. So I think it's important for us also to be involved in these conversations. There is no such thing as like, we just give them one tip, just share that, and that's it, right? It's going to be that continuous journey and being involved together with them.
Yeah, I think cybersecurity for, like you say, for the seniors may also involve education in terms of misinformation and disinformation when it comes to some of these security tips. I'm quite conscious of the time. I know that there's a lot of other topics that we can drill into, especially on AI. I think we just kind of skimmed the surface, but perhaps for next time. But thank you so much for your time today, Emil.